All right, continuing our conversation about how to run a country, or just more generally how a country functions. Um, and again, just the theme of organizing a defense. Um, it does leak into health, right? It does always leak into how well fed, how healthy, really how happy your populace is. Um, and that all goes into having a home, right? Having a place to sleep. Because humans, apes, these evolved form of apes that we are, we need good food, nutritious food, macronutrients that are healthy and cover all the bases, the right minerals and, sunlight. And we just need these healthy nutrients. We also need sleep. We need to be able to sleep peacefully and rest and recover every day. It's how you have a healthy, strong community, nation kind of thing. But one of the kind of it's becoming more of an individual thing these days. It's not so much a community effort. And it should become much more of a community effort, is exercise. And really, for me, it's more of a physical intelligence, right? We're really big on college education right now. I've mentioned reading and writing. I mean, you have to teach kids how to read and write. I mean, that's basic, because kids are naturally gonna move. They're gonna run around and be physically active. I mean, that's something you do not have to teach. That is innate. And in fact, it's impossible to make them stop unless you're feeding them like shit and you're making them, you're mentally breaking them down, and you are locking them inside of rooms where they have to sit for hours and hours. And those are they are kind of unnatural. Those are unnatural. I mean, the education, especially at the higher end, sort of requires, of course, sitting in a room for a long time, to study, to sit on the computer, to learn. But, the physical training, I mean, it is so important. And it all comes back to organizing the defense. Because, if you have kids who are not physically active, if you have kids who are lacking a physical intelligence, they just do not understand their physical bodies. They haven't felt, every part of themselves yet. They're not familiar. They're not, coordinated. If they're uncoordinated, I mean, those are major issues. Those are strategic, societal issues that can create vulnerabilities, especially in the defense, So, one of my big things, a big point of my life personally, I kind of obviously influenced by my own experience, but is being physically intelligent. And focusing on being able to move intelligently, being able to, move quickly, being flexible. Your mind, it's weird how your mind actually learns differently. You actually can you can bend more and you can deal with more things if you have a strong and flexible and quick body, physical body. It allows you to be mentally quick, mentally strong, mentally flexible. It's weird. It is weird. It's kind of this kind of discord of what your brain experiences and what your body experiences, and how those either match or they're mismatched. So, a really big point of organizing the defense is teaching kids to read and write, but you have to provide the opportunities for them to move and to be involved, especially in social, like, community sport. I mean, I personally, my opinion here, again, this is all opinion, but the game of soccer is basically the single greatest, form of sport ever devised by humans. And it's just because it's a really good example of, you have to be able to run, you have to be fast, you have to be flexible, but then you need some strength too. You need some physical strength, some mental strength. You have to be able to hold it together. I mean, it's a tactical, it's a strategic game. It's just, there's a lot going on. Very thoughtful, physically and intellectually. And so a game like soccer, to me, it's a really good rubric for how to design, kind of a training regimen, especially just for kids, and the idea that you're playing, and we're obviously playing against other people. We're not playing against the environment. Sometimes, playing against the environment is much more scary, but playing against other people in a nice friendly match, it really does. It helps train with the physical intelligence. So, to me, I'm going to talk a lot. You'll hear me talk so much about the intellectual stuff, the political stuff, philosophical, spiritual. But there's something you can't speak about. It's hard to put it into words. It's more nonverbal, right? And it's that physical intelligence. It's something that you can't really explain very well. You have to just, you have to experience it yourself. It's something where you just kind of have to wink, at the camera, and like either you get it or you don't. And I don't know. So anyway, being able to jump high, run fast, pick up heavy things, be able to flex yourself. What's the verb for that? I forget. But be flexible. The physical intelligence is a huge part of organizing the defense. So when it comes to kids, we just have to trust that the natural process of them being physical is going to, appear, and you really just have to let them do that. Reading and writing are not a natural process. Learning about scientific studies and understanding the scientific method and experimentation and, reference work and reading about history and applying it to the future, these kinds of things. Those are all of the intellectual pursuits that we actually really do have to actively teach kids. So, when you're teaching, when you have to sit them down, when you're forced to put them in the room and make them sit for hours, you really do. You want to be very picky about what you're choosing to teach them. The humanities, just from a young age, of course, are sort of the agreed upon teaching subjects, because kids will naturally, they're naturally going to learn the other stuff, as long as you provide the premises for it, provide the context and the time and place. The idea of recess, having recess is really, it is just as important as any of the other subjects. We haven't even talked about art, music or painting, or, it's kind of a higher level of movie making, things like this. Those are definitely important as well. But just in terms of organizing the defense, having that physical intelligence is really important. I think, and a big thing of course, the organized sports and kind of playing against other people. American football is okay. The problem with it, of course, is it does sort of deliver grave injury in some cases. I mean, obviously soccer is capable of that too. Basketball. There are better sports like tennis and stuff, which are not as dangerous, but, they're also not as tactically involved. And that's why, I mean, I just personally think soccer is so amazing because it's 11 players versus another 11. So there's a lot of moving parts. But a big part of the physical intelligence, something that you can't explain to people, is the idea of kind of being like physically struck, your body being struck by another person's body. And, obviously there's not really much punching, you don't get punched in the face really, in these organized sports, but it sort of opens you to the idea that, like, being physically attacked in a way, or being physically sort of hurt by someone else, it isn't that bad. It's not that bad. It's something that is, it hurts and maybe even can injure you, but it's, it is something that's just kind of part of existence. It's not a psychological terror that a lot of people make it out to be. I think a big issue we have a lot of people in the U.S. and in a lot of Americans right now, and just people that live here, even if you're a non-citizen, who they sort of lack the physical intelligence of understanding what it's like to be struck. I mean, personally, I would condone, God, what's the word? Endorse. I would endorse kind of having low impact, basically fighting training for kids, just so that they can understand what it means, to be struck and to strike someone else. And then the same thing with, firearm training. I mean, firearm training is very much the same thing, like teaching kids what guns are, what they're capable of doing, why it is so important to use them with responsibility, but also to just kind of understand what they're capable of. These kinds of things are just, they're so important for organizing the defense. So, a lot of these themes, they enter very deeply into my own sort of way that I plan, how to run a country. I mean, the way that I would run a country, the way that I think we should run our country is highly involved in, allowing kids to have a physical intelligence and allowing them to dispel fear of being struck, the fear of being shot to death, that's pretty visceral. It's unnatural, right? It's not a normal thing. It's not something that you can train for. Nobody can really tell you what it's going to feel like. You're not going to like shoot kids to teach them what it feels like to be shot, right? Like, that's stupid. That doesn't make any sense. So there is still this, there is a legitimate, genuine fear that surrounds firearms. And I'll just end today with the kind of some quick stats. People under the age of 25, under the age of 30, sort of depending on your demographic, the most common cause of death is being struck by a car, right? So either as a pedestrian on the street and getting struck and killed by a car, and that includes mainly larger cars, so like big SUVs and big pickup trucks. So think of like Dodge Ram. Dodge Ram is the worst one. and then, Ford F-150s and Chevy, whatever Chevy is, and then also the big, the GMC Yukon or whatever, the big, they're larger than World War II tanks, the big SUVs. Those, they strike and they kill kids at a high rate, right? So that's one sort of unnatural. It's just an unnatural way to die. And it's the leading cause of death. And then the other one is being shot to death, with a firearm. Those are the two most common, causes of death for young people in the US. And honestly, it's all preventable. It is weird. And that is part of organizing the defense. It really is, because if we're losing, we're losing young people to this bullshit. It's kind of like we're under invasion. We're being invaded by these huge trucks that, it's some tax bracket, right? It's a tax cut for car manufacturers if they make it really big and heavy, because then they can put a larger engine in it, and it enters a new emission standard for tax deduction. I forget what the exact reason why the market in the last 15 years in the US has shifted towards just larger and larger and larger, just bigger and bigger and bigger cars, because they're profitable, right? It's a very profitable thing, but it kills lots of kids. And I'm not a fan. And then, the firearms epidemic. I mean, that is really Osama bin Laden's fault. But I mean, it's also just the fault of, again, the idea of like these perverted cowards who they just, no, first of all, nobody is giving them help. They're not really asking for help. Their destructive behavior is being enabled. There's no supportive behavior being enabled. Supportive behavior is sort of shunned. The idea of therapy or the idea of giving people hugs, these types of things. And those are the two main sort of vulnerabilities, strategic vulnerabilities that we have. The final one, it's kind of tough to triangulate, but suicide, of course, suicide is a big one, but that does enter into firearm deaths in a certain way, of course. But, and then suicide attempts, of course, by women. Girls are 4 times more likely to attempt suicide than boys, and then boys are twice as likely to actually succeed in committing suicide than girls are. And that, that's a strange stat as well to think about. But that is caused by social media. Social media has kind of catapulted sort of the suicidal thoughts, or the idea of kind of not wanting to belong in this society anymore, and I mean, again, that's just super fucked up. It's just not a good thing. And when it comes to organizing the defense, the defense of our civilization, again, this is an anthropological truth of when you first settle down somewhere and you're organizing your civilization, the first thing you do is you organize a defense. And we are not quite there yet. So we haven't, we're not there. So we need to take care of those issues, and then we can talk. But yeah, I will see you guys later.